Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to another episode of Maps of Becoming, the Eudaimonia podcast. My name is Edwina Murphy-Droomer, and I'm so thrilled that you are with me on this journey. So today, what I want to talk about is the role model. It's something that I talked about a lot in the years when I was doing all my work that was specific with mothers in a League of Extraordinary Mothers. And it's this sense of, what are we role modeling for our children? What are we making motherhood look like? And so we can zoom out and expand this to every area of our lives. What are we making womanhood look like? What are we making being a mother look like? What are we making, being an entrepreneur or a lawyer or a teacher or whatever the profession is that you have, what is the career? What are you role modeling within your work environment to the people that you work with colleagues, to the clients that come to you? There's so many areas of our lives where we're unconsciously having an impact on other people. And I feel like this is gets to become a really fun conversation, because it's taking what is largely unconscious and bringing it into our conscious field. And one of the fun ways to think about it and to look at it is like being the leading lady in the story of your life. And if you imagined somebody filming your life from the moment that you get up in the morning to the moment that you go to bed at night, what would that movie look like? What would you become known for? How would people describe you? And I think about, the rituals, the things that I do on a daily basis and how I approach those, whether it's getting up in the morning and getting out the door in the dark to walk for an hour or so. And I think what would really make that into a scene that I would want, that's that kind of role model thing that I want my life to look like. And is it turning on our phones and sitting for an hour with our phones in a slightly comatose state? Or is it rolling out of bed and pulling on clothes that you want to walk in and your sneakers and heading out the door in the dark? What does that evoke if you think of that scene? And then there's, what else is in your morning? For me, when I get back, it's like coffee. The anticipation. Coffee for me is one of my just coveted rituals in the morning. I'm a complete coffee snob, make my own coffee. And so I, grind my own beans, and then there is, the sound of the beans grinding, and then there's the drip of the espresso coffee, and then there's the smell and the sitting down and the particular cup that I choose, and I curl up on the couch. By this stage, in the last few weeks, my son's beautiful 4-month-old wolfhound puppy is exuberantly part of that whole ritual as he wiggles and does his morning thing with that puppy love, and then getting him to training him to sit quietly so that I can have my coffee in peace without him bouncing off me. And this is the movie, this is the story of my morning. And then it's conversations with whoever happens to be in the house at that time, and then there's a shower, and then there is the choosing what I'm moisturizing my skin with. And all these little rituals happen on repeat every morning consciously, and they're not unconscious. Choosing the clothes that I want to wear that day, how those clothes are going to make me feel, And so the day continues, and it's like, okay, so what are the rituals in your morning? What are you role modeling for the people that are around you or in your world? And when you watch movies or consider people that you admire, what are they role modeling? What are the things that inspire you? What are the things that feel like a truly beautiful life, a romantic life, the kind of life that you would want to live? Because this is how we learn who we want to be in the world. And it's always interesting to notice conversations in your own mind about, well, like, I could never, or that's the kind of person that you are, but it's not me. And that's definitely a thing. But if it's a way of being that you want to embody, if your soul yearns for it, it is absolutely meant for you. I have this belief now that, or this knowing, which is different to a belief, it's a true knowing that what our soul yearns for truly is meant for us. So when we think about life, I was listening to one of my mentors today, Richard Rudd, who's the founder of Gene Keys, and he was talking about the Hierophant. And the Hierophant in tarot is the 5th card, and the Hierophant is the connector between the spirit and human, the higher, the creator, God, Mother Nature, whatever you call that higher intelligence, and the human. And so we have this intelligence within us, but there are guides, there are teachers, there are mentors that support us on those journeys. And in tarot, that has traditionally been represented by the Pope. And I feel like so many people have pulled away from religion or don't feel an affinity to Catholicism or Christianity, but there is still this sense of absolutely being connected, the knowing that there is a higher intelligence, but still working on cultivating that relationship. And I think one of the great tragedies that has come about through religion and religious teachings is this disconnect. It's like the Pope or the priest is the authority, and in order to have that connection, we must turn to them for guidance. And I feel that now there is certainly a role for that, but there has to be the conversation that works for everybody in ensuring that that connection is alive and well. So that's the Hierophant. And in Gene Keys, it's okay if you don't know Gene Keys and if you don't know tarot, this is just talking about archetypes. They're just names for archetypes that live within and around all of us. I'm just conscious that my elbow is scraping on the desk, making weird noises. If you're watching on YouTube, it probably makes sense, but if you're listening to the audio, it might sound a bit weird. I'll remain conscious of that. So the shadow, like the dark or the low frequency expression of the Hierophant, the role model, is arrogance and intellect. And I feel like this just gives such a great picture of what we think about in the world as these leaders. There can be so much arrogance in that conversation that it's repellent. And so the people that are in our communities or in society to be role models often make people want to turn away, because there's an energy of arrogance, there's an energy of you're lesser than, there's an energy of dominance. And the intellect is the other side of this. So the intellect is that very left brain, logical, rules, structure. This is the way it is, and there's no movement outside of that. And I think if we look at conversations that have been very public, that are aligned with that, it's the teachings of in times gone by of, like, you're not allowed to get divorced, or about being gay, or about abortion, or about, like, there's all these different very hard and fast belief systems that have became dogmatic rules and structures within society that were very left-brained. And so what we're looking at now is conversations that are much more right-brained and much more about what is true for you, what is for the highest good of all, what is the knowing within you around these structures, these rules, these dogmatic beliefs that have been in place forever, and being guided by that, by your own inner knowing, the High Priestess, as I've talked about on previous podcasts. So I thought it would be, it would be fun to look at this through the lens of a movie, or even two movies, because it, rather than just being sort of abstract ideas and words, I love to use movies or books, but movies particularly, because it gives a visual of these archetypes. And one of the movies that I've used over and over and over again, because it is one of my favorite movies, and the lead character has been, well, essentially my muse for many, many, many years. And the movie's Chocolat. And the lead character is played by Juliette Binoche, and her name is Vianne. Some of you may have read the book and not watched the movie, or vice versa. But for this, I'm going to, use the movie because of the visual. And then there's Armand, who's the grandmother figure, and she's Judi Dench is who plays her. Anyway, so if we think about the role model, and if we use the tarot archetypes, we can see how all of the first 9 that I spoke about, I think that was on the second episode 2 of this podcast, I talked about the first 9 major arcana in tarot, because it gave such an easy way to connect to this work and to the archetypes that live within you. And so in Vianne, we can look at every archetype. So she arrives in, and it's okay if you don't know the movie, I'll talk you through the basics of it, but I just so recommend you watch it. And if you've seen it before but you haven't watched it for a while, go back and watch it again, because it really is just the most fabulous, fabulous story. So she arrives as a single mother in a little French village, and her, her story is that she's carried through life by the north wind. The north wind is, creates an agitation, a restlessness in her soul, which means that she then just packs everything up and moves on again. So she's essentially a gypsy, I guess. But she arrives in this village with her as a single unmarried woman in an era when that was very shocking, with her little daughter, and rents a building with a shop with the intention of turning it into a chocolaterie. And this village, so that's the full, it is the beginning. The I begin, it is the courage phase. So she arrives, and this is a village that is very strictly controlled and run by a conte, so by the church, and everybody goes to church and everybody follows the rules of the church. in to the T. And there is this sort of shadow of fear that seems to cover everybody, and there's these furtive looks, and what will LeConte think, and if I speak to this woman who's a single mother, we're going to be ousted and shunned and in trouble. And she's really, she arrives with this red cape on, and so she's the picture of everything that goes against the teachings of the church. And she doesn't attend church, but it becomes very apparent that she is a spiritual woman. And so slowly but surely she gets to know the different personalities in this village, and through her way of being, through her generosity, through her love, through her kindness, through her passion, through her creation of pleasure, she makes chocolates, and this chocolate shop opens during Lent. And so, there's all these different conflicting things that come into play where choice is required. You either follow the rules and fall in line with fear, or you choose from love, from knowing for what is correct for you. So we see all of the 9 archetypes very clearly in the character of Vianne. So we see the magician. She is deeply connected to the elements, or the elemental witch, as I call her. So she uses earth in tarot, so the pentacles, which is skills, and it is matter and the physical body, and it's the chocolate, and so she uses these things to create. And then she uses, there's the swords, which is her thoughts and her beliefs, and then there is water and the cups, which is her emotions and her emotional intelligence. And then there are the wands, which is fire, which is action and life force and energy. So we see all of that come alive within this character. And then we see the High Priestess, the inner knowing. She knows what is correct for her. She knows her truth. She knows her values, and she stands in those unapologetically. It's like, this is what is correct for me. This is what is correct as a mother for my daughter. This is the way that we live, with absolute love and acceptance that other people are different, but I don't need to change me to please you. And I think this is one of the most magnificent aspects of this character, the role modeling of that. So then we see the Empress, and the Empress is all about, abundance and pleasure, and she is the Earth Mother archetype. So I talked about that last week. And then we see the Emperor. The Emperor is the builder, the structure. It is the masculine. So we think about the Empress is the being, and the Emperor is the doing. So she builds this chocolate shop. She does the work. She orders the goods. She, makes the chocolates. The walls are painted. There's this fabulous, at the beginning of the movie, the windows are all covered in newspaper, and the children are trying to peek through. There's great curiosity about what's happening in the chocolate shop, and then the chocolate shop is opened, and that's all the doing. That is the building of the life. That is the Emperor. Responsibility, but also protection, and her protection of her daughter and the life that they're choosing to live. So then we get to the 5th card, which is the Hierophant, and the teacher, the guide, the connector between spirit and human, and spirit within human. And she role models this beautifully. Yes, she uses tarot cards. That comes a lot more in the book than it does in the movies, but she uses tarot cards, and she's obviously a spiritual woman, and I'm quite certain in certain eras she would have been deemed a witch and burned at the stake. But she's, you know, she speaks to her mother. She has her mother's ashes with her by her bed, and she talks to her mother all the time, and it's very clear that, you know, that she had a very spiritual upbringing. And then we see the lovers, and, you know, part of this movie is, you know, Johnny Depp arrives, and Johnny Depp is a, you know, a river gypsy, and they end up having a relationship. But it's, you know, like, as far as the lovers as archetypes within us, it is this balance of the masculine and feminine, the being and the doing. It's the coming together of the Empress and the Emperor frequencies and energies within us, which is the 6th card. And then we move into the 7th card, which is the Chariot. And it's like, when those energies come together, we can move forward in alignment to be creating the life that we're here to live. And this is where all of these archetypes start to work together and come together. So we see the Chariot, which is in movement. Traditionally, we see in the traditional tarot, there's 2 sphinxes, one's black and one's white, representing the unconscious and the conscious, the masculine and the feminine. It's the opposites, the shadow and the light. In one of my favorite decks, which is Seasons of the Witches, the winter tarot, she's being carried by 2 swans. So she's on a swing, and there's a black and a white swan, but it really is about movement. And then we see, you know, the 8th card is strength. And this is, yes, it is strength in a physical sense, but it's also the strength of spirit. It's resilience. It is confidence. I feel like the Fool is courage. The Fool is this, like, I've got the courage, and the confidence comes later. The confidence comes when the courage is being put into practice. So this is strength, and it is the strength to stand firmly in your values, to stand firmly for your beliefs, for what is correct for you without being moved. Makes me, every time I think of that, I can hear Dr. Maya Angelou's voice in my head, and she's got a poem called I think it's in The Grandmothers, She Shall Not Be Moved, and that's like the energy of strength. So that's the 8th card, and then we have the 9th card, which is the Hermit. And I've got 2 clients at the moment that both have this as the archetype of their name. So if you look at your name and you alphabetize your name, so A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, etc. So you look at it, and then you can add up the numbers and find out the archetype of your name. So mine is the High Priestess, mine is 2, Edwina, and I've got 2 clients at the moment that are both the Hermit, which is really interesting. And the Hermit is the one that goes into the dark in solitude, in silence, until they can illuminate the truth for themselves. So in illuminating the truth for themselves, they often become an illuminator within their communities, within their families, within society, somebody who illuminates the truth for other people. So, you know, all of these archetypes play out beautifully. And I think one of the things that is truly magnificent about this movie is that there is a woman within the community, Jacqueline, who when we get to know this character at the beginning, when we're getting to know her, she's the one that's pinching things, and she's a bit of a pickpocket, and I think of her like a bowerbird. She's got this desire to collect pretty things, and she's obviously deeply unhappy, and her whole demeanor is very closed in and shut away. There's no sense of light in her soul. And Vianne notices her and befriends her and holds space for her, sees her potential, and through the movie she comes to life and her light is turned back on as this hermit light is turned back on. And one of the things that's really, you know, she's the mother archetype for Jacqueline. But over time, as she begins to blossom and flourish and come back to the truth of who she is, at the end of the movie, we see Jacqueline actually stand as the mother archetype for Vianne. And, you know, this beautiful sense of sisterhood. So when you think about role modeling and being a role model, I think it's lovely to think about it in terms of, you know, who are the people that have really captured your attention and what is it about them, and who are the people that repulse you, and you think I could never, or I would never want to be like that, and really noticing what those qualities are rather than it just being, you know, a noticing of the person. See if you can identify the language. What is it about them? Unfailingly kind, generous, loving, courageous, confident, adventurous, intelligent, grounding, calm. What are the qualities? What are the qualities that repulse you? This sort of sense of arrogance, of inauthenticity, of selfishness, of dominance, the desire to always be, you know, one-upmanship or tearing other people down in order to look better, like that kind of gossipy thing. What is it? You know, like what are those qualities? And actually naming them, because the more conscious we can be about all these things and the more we can connect to the idea of being a role model, this is, you know, literally how we can become the change we want to see in the world. You know, it's one of those lines that you hear, what is the change you want to see in the world? And it's like, well, I don't know. You know, like yeah, maybe I do know. And it's interesting thinking this morning, I was talking to my husband and my eldest son about the war that is going on the other side of the globe for us at the moment. And it's like, well, how do we, you know, yes, we can look at that and feel really miserable about that. But what are we, you know, what can we do? And it's like, well, this is the conversation. What are you role modeling? What is the frequency? What is the energy that you are putting out in the world? And we can get very caught in simply looking at the fear and what is horrible and what is miserable. And that becomes the whole energy. We know that energy is contagious. You walk into a room and you can feel the person that's a thundercloud. You can feel the performer that's inauthentic. You can feel the judgmentals, or you can feel the sense of belonging and embrace and warmth and generosity. You know, these feelings are contagious. And so part of being a role model is being aware of the energy that we're putting out into the world, of the frequency that we are emitting into the world. And this gives us a sense of purpose. So if I come back to this, you know, maps of becoming, it's all part of this picture, and using the archetypes as stepping stones or as touchstones is actually a phrase that makes more sense. As using the archetypes as touchstones to guide us on our journey of becoming, always more deeply connected to who our soul yearns for us to be, for what our soul yearns for us to do and have. So I put out in my community this week maps of becoming the archetypal vision board, which is the new way that I'm doing vision boards. And I'm so excited about this because it's actually there's two vision boards. And forever there was this sense of a piece missing. So for many years now, I've been doing vision boards with people, and there was always this sense of I could get people into a sense of like complete excitement and anticipation for their lives. But unless I was working with them ongoing, I got feedback quite regularly that it just becomes a pretty picture on the wall. It's like, well, what do we do with this? I can see what I want. I can see what I want to have. I can see what I want to do. I can see who I want to be. But then the program finishes and we just go back into our everyday life, and it's the becoming, the person that can bring that vision board to life is the bit that was missing. And so now I've come up with a second vision board. It's like they work together. That is the archetypal vision board that is unique to each person. Yes, these archetypes are all on there, but I also bring in gene keys. I bring in the 5 universal truths so that it is, and your human design, so that it is absolutely unique and tailored and personalized to you. So that's something that is now alive and open for people within my world, within the eudaimonia community, which of course, if you're listening to this, you are part of. All right, beautiful souls, I'm going to leave it there. This is a really fun archetype to play with, the role model. In Gene Keys, the role model is a line 6. If you do your Gene Keys, you may find that you have a line 6 in there somewhere. And the line 6 is the line 3 for the first half of their life. So if you've got a line 3, you've got this kind of energy as well. But ultimately, we're all role models. You know, every time we are in connection with another person, we're role modeling something. And so becoming more and more conscious of that, I feel, gives a real sense of meaning to what our purpose is in this life. All right, beautiful souls, that is it from me today. So much love, and bye for now.